This G-Fox program has become a phenomenon. I never predicted it, but as I've gone out and spoken to groups, I can understand why. Because I'm like you. I remember G-Fox, I have fond memories, I've been connected with it, and it just brings you back to a time when you were happy in the 1950s. And I spoke with Artis Abbott, who's here. Artis, where are you? Okay, Artis, I spoke with Artis a year and a half ago when I said, gee, Artis, I'm just planning this program on G-Fox, and I would love to do it at the Vernon Historical Society. And she said, oh, well, we plan way ahead. We're about a year and a half ahead of you. So it just seemed that, wow, suddenly here's January of 2012. But the good thing is that in the course of that time, I have learned so much more about G-Fox. I have met so many people who have worked there. At the Historical Society where I work, we have 30 interviews with former G-Fox employees. I've listened to them all. But most important, what you all need to know is I know G-Fox like you do. Because I was speaking in West Hartford, and this woman said to me, hey, basically, hey girlie, you better know about as much about G-Fox as I do because we loved it. And I thought, oh my God, what if I came from Michigan to Connecticut in the 1980s, that I'd have no credibility. But in fact, I am a Connecticut girl, and Artis, since I saw you, I actually traced my great-grandmother back to Vernon in the 1830s, so I'm connected here too. But, you know, I wonder, I've asked myself, why is it that we love G-Fox? Why does it connect so much with those of us who remember the 50s? And I think it's this. The 50s was a really uncomplicated time. There were no super stop and shops. You bought your groceries at the local market. And I lived in Wethersfield. We went to the Franklin Avenue. Your meat was ground in front of you. You only had one brand of potato chips. I think it was Wise potato chips. There were the profusion of restaurants. In my family, we were a family of 5, and the big deal was to go to Howard Johnson's on the Berlin Turnpike twice a year. Those were the only places to go. And the bill would come, and my father would look at it and say, oh my God, $10, you know, we can't be doing this too often. So that I was just a kid in the 50s when my mother would bring me to G-Fox, but it was so exceptional and so different that it has stayed with me all these years. I gotta get a drink of water. So I grew up in Wethersfield in the 1950s, and my mother and I used to go uptown to G-Fox as frequently as we possibly could. Then G-Fox tracked with my entire life. Moved to Glastonbury in the 60s. The way I stayed in touch with my girlfriends in Wethersfield was by meeting them in G-Fox and going shopping. When I moved to Glastonbury, also I met girls there who were part of the Connie Trent Club at G-Fox. Do any of you know who Connie Trent was? Good for you. Good for you. Few people do. Connie Trent was like a Betty Crocker, a made-up name with this attractive woman in her 20s who would train young teenage girls on makeup and beauty and modeling so that they would come back to G-Fox and they would shop for their bridal dresses, etc. there. Then in the 70s, I got married. All my wedding presents came from G-Fox. In the 80s, I continued to shop there, and I was one of the last shoppers in 1993 when G-Fox closed. I was working at Travelers at the time, went over to the store. They had fabulous sales, and there was an American Oriental rug I had to have. So it was reduced from like $500 to $200. I bought it on my lunch hour. It was like a 5x7 rug. I lugged it across Main Street, Hartford, up 6 flights at Travelers, home on the commuter bus. How I did it, I have no idea. And it's still on my dining room table, so I think about G-Fox all the time. So because I obviously have a captive audience, I do have to say a few words about where I work at the Connecticut Historical Society. We are in the West End of Hartford. I have some handouts here. What we have now is a fantastic exhibit called Making Connecticut. If you have not been there or have not seen it, you must come and see it because it's 400 years of Connecticut history. There's nothing like it. It includes the oldest chair in the United States, which we have, the hat that was worn by the last man shot for the American Revolution, we've got that. The sword that was used by William Hayden at the Pequot War. And as you wind your way around, you go through the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s to 1980s. And in the display for the 1970s is my very own going away outfit. It was pink suede. I could not part with it. And it's now in a museum. How great is that? So that's the exhibit, Making Connecticut. Please pick one of these up. I live in Glastonbury. I know we all had a problem with trees in October, but another exhibit that we have right now is called New Life for Connecticut Trees. It's fabulous. Two young men who went all over the state, and they have made beautiful, beautiful furniture, unexpected furniture from trees that have been destroyed in the past. It's really worth seeing. It's a big surprise. But the Connecticut Historical Society is truly a wonderful place for anyone who has any interest in any way in the state, whether it's your family, your town, collecting period furniture, collecting American antiques. We're the first place to shop. So many of you are standing. I'm going to move right to the presentation so that we can get this going. So I'd like to say that when I started this, I've been really all over the state, and those of you who want to leave because it's cold and awful, I'm doing this in 30 times this year. But the first time I did this program, I was in Mystic, Connecticut, and I said to the audience, how many of you ever worked at G. Fox? Can I see a show of hands of how many of you ever worked there? Wow, that's incredible. That is really impressive. And how many of you ever shopped there? Yeah. And that's where I thought, I have a subject that will connect all over the state. So here we go. What I like to do is start back, and let's think about the 1950s. So color television was introduced. Favorite shows, of course, were The Honeymooners, Father Knows Best, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, I Love Lucy. Kids watched the Howdy Doody Time, Mickey Mouse Club, and of course Lassie. Disneyland was founded, McDonald's was founded. The Dodgers moved from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. Elvis Presley appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show in the 50s. The Broadway hits were My Fair Lady, West Side Story, Damn Yankees, The Sound of Music, and Dr. Seuss published The Cat in the Hat. The average house, look at that, $25,000. The average yearly income, $4,100. Afford, $3,100. A year at Harvard, folks, $1,250. Less than a microwave. And the local celebrities, you all know this. And, you know, when I was in New Milford, everybody all over the state, they all know Bob Steele. Remember, I grew up in Wethersfield, where he was from. You turn on your radio to WTIC every morning. What was the news? What was the word for the day? Did I have school? We all knew Bob Steele. But Bill Savitt, I have to say in New Milford, POMG, or see Savitt and you'll have it. Then they got it. But he wasn't quite as well known. And by the way, with the Connecticut Historical Society, we also have an exhibit at the Old State House where we have a diamond golf putter that was Bill Savitt's on exhibit. You got to see it. And the one place to shop, of course, was boxes. Now, I usually don't want to take time for this, but I wrote notes to myself because what were the other stores that you remembered downtown in the 50s?
Downtown.
Okay, I'm not doing this again this time. Okay. These were the other stores that I had. If you remember a different one, I'll tell you what, raise your hand. This is what I had. We had Brown Thompson, Sage Allen's, Wise Smith. Do you remember Wise Smith? See, I don't remember Wise Smith. And Wise Smith became Corvettes. We had Grant's, Kresge's, Woolworth's, Newberry's. And did anyone remember the Bluebird Shop on Pratt Street? Wow. Does anybody remember a store? What store did I name? Steiger's. Good for you. Good for you. Youth Center. So, Youth Center. That's right. Okay, we got to go on. But this drawing was done. My brother graduated from Wethersfield High School in 1955. And one of his colleagues, and one of them is here, in fact, two of them are here, became an artist, and she did these wonderful little depictions. And she was kind enough to share them with me, so that's why you see them in this presentation. So the store was established in 1847 across the street from the store we remember. And it sold notions and silks and parasols and goods like that a ship would come up the river and unload, and it became popular even in the mid-19th century. Then it moved across the street and expanded to the location of the store that we remember. And as you see that sign, again, we own, and it's on exhibit at the Old State House. Very sadly, in 1917, the entire store was destroyed by fire. And this is what it looked like the next day. There was nothing left, nothing. They lost all their products, all their records, everything. So there was a point at which the family was thinking, do we rebuild? What do we do? The community in Hartford said, we are behind you 100%. Every store, every church front, every restaurant, all the citizens said, whatever we can do to help you. So that G. Fox was started to sell their products all over the town, in the Old State House, in other storefronts. They also paid their employees the entire time that they were rebuilding, which was pretty unbelievable. And here's even more exceptional. They estimated that 90% of the people who had outstanding bills came back and paid them. They didn't have to. Remember, G. Fox lost all their accounting records, but they wanted so much for that store to survive. So here's an example of one of these other storefronts where they were obviously selling women's garments and shoes. And then they rebuilt the store that we remember. It started with the 11 stories we remember, and then in 1959 they added on. By the 1950s, G. Fox and Company, our hometown store, was the largest privately owned department store in America, and we had it here. So here were their principles of success. You all remember these. The customer's always right. If you can get it anywhere, you can get it at G. Fox. If G. Fox says it's so, it must be so. And G. Fox is never knowingly undersold. Some of you remember the name of Ann Uccello. Ann was a mayor of Hartford. Before she worked at G. Fox. And her job was to go to all of the other stores in the area to see what dresses and things were selling for, and then come back and report them so that they were not undersold. Now, the 50s family was stylish. I put this in because I want you to, again, go back to that period. I love this picture so much. This is from our Hartford Electric Light Company picture collection. The father has just come home. I say it's like Zeus has just returned. Look at him. I mean, you've got the mother and the daughter just looking at him in awe and wonder that he's so fantastic. They just place the baby there. It's like, oh my God, I'm watching him on the phone. What a genius he is. And I love this picture too, but because it reminds me so much of my family. My mother used to doll herself up before my father came home. He worked in the insurance companies. She'd put on her lipstick, her stockings, everything. She would look gorgeous as if she was doing nothing all day but waiting for him to return. And this little girl reminds me so much of me. I have to ask the ladies here, how many of you ever had a tonette? A tonette perm, okay? For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, my hair is bone straight. I went through my childhood with curls like this and a kitchen that stunk to high heaven because every mother wanted their little girl to look like Shirley Temple. So we all got a home permanent, which is unbelievable that you would do that to a child. And it was tighter than tight. And then after maybe a month, it would relax a little bit, but that's what we looked like. So I look at this picture and I think, yep, that could be us. Look at people going on vacation. There were no leisure suits. There were no jogging outfits. You dressed for every occasion, even to go on vacation. Look at her. She's wearing a whole suit. Now, the 50s gal, of course, loved to shop. And Fox's had something for everyone. Now, when I go out and talk like this, I always say there are some things that I don't need more of. I don't need any more Fox's hat box, but I do need photographs. This is the only one we have of the storefront. If any of you have original photographs of the storefront, I would love to have it. But you can see what Fox's did. They threw everything they had in the front so that you knew this is a true department store. I'm going to throw in toboggans and snowshoes and hockey sticks. Their point being, whatever you want, you can get it there. So now let's go in, and if you recall, you would go up those escalators, close your eyes, picture yourself going up those escalators. There was always someone there to help you. Try doing that in Home Depot. I don't think so. You know, you're there for like, you know, or Walmart for, you know, hours before you see a salesperson. There was always someone to help you, and there were also what were called floor walkers who were wearing red carnations so that they would walk through, and if there was any issue, if you couldn't find something, if the sales lady was away or too busy, they would help you too. The whole point of G-Fox, and the reason we remember it so well, is that the customer was king. So this was the busy street floor, and unfortunately we don't have great pictures of this, but listen to this. Just 2 weeks ago, I got a tour of the old building, and I found this treasure trove of photographs that I'm trying to get the management to allow me to scan, because we will have better pictures of that first floor. So hear this talk in March, and I'll be all set. But on the first floor, you'd have your cosmetics, accessories, and jewelry, of course. And I put this there. It's hard for you to see. You won't be able to see it, but I wanted you to see the price of perfume. Remember, this is the 50s. A sales girl made about $60 a week. Shalimar was $45 for 2 ounce. So you would be spending just about a week's salary to buy that bottle of Shalimar. Now here's the other amazing thing. We have, again, in oral histories of people who worked and shopped there. And there's the story of a woman who bought one of those expensive bottles of perfume. In unpacking the trunk of her car, it fell and it broke. She got a free replacement, and it was delivered to her house. These are pocketbooks sold on the first floor, and it's one of the reasons, which you see in the course of this presentation, of why, again, Fox's was so fabulous. Their buyers were beyond compare. Could you hold that for a second? Because what I have over here is in Glastonbury the other day, a woman gave me this purse and said, oh, well, when you talk about G-Fox, you've got to show this purse. Now look at this. You've got the evening bag, you've got the woman's alligator bag. This was a purse, again, from the 50s. It's just exquisite. And inside it says, made in England expressly for G-Fox and Company. Their buyers went all over the world to buy for G-Fox. And that's what made them so exceptional. If you were a buyer at G-Fox, thank you. If you were a buyer at G-Fox, you could go anywhere because you were so good, you were so skilled, you knew what to buy, you knew where to go. It was this kind of variety that brought people from New York City and all over New England to our store in Hartford. Now, you all remember the mezzanine, and you all loved the mezzanine, didn't you? You had the optical, coins and stamps, men's accessories, and there were 2 departments, and those of you who've heard my talk before cannot raise your hand for this. There were 2 departments that were the biggest money makers, and they weren't the toy departments. What do you think they were?
Stationery.
Who said stationery? How did you know stationery?
I used to work there.
God bless you. Would you ever have known stationery? Stationery, do you know what the other one was? Hosiery. Because all the women wore stockings, right? You know, the stockings in the shape of the leg? So it was stationery and hosiery. When you worked there, you were a busy girl, weren't you? But it was the biggest money maker. I think that's so interesting. They also had an in-house pharmacy with 15 registered pharmacists. And last week in Glastonbury, Kathy, a guy gave me one of these Foxco bottles with mouthwash. But what you see here is you could get rubbing alcohol or vitamins, anything you can imagine as far as a pharmacy. And booze. And I guess I should ask you too, if you, after the stationery store, did you then go down on the Fridays, get some booze, have it sent home? Because there have been a lot of some of the sales girls, and they have said, yeah, it was a pretty easy way to get booze delivered to your house with nobody knowing it. It would be Friday, I'd go down and I would get it. But the liquor could only be sold in a certain part of the store, X number of feet from the church. And as we all know, it was across from Church Street, so it was always there in the same spot. And of course, men could escape lawn work on the second floor. And this was the Madison shop, and it was the era where you would go, if you were a young man and got your clothes every fall, you would go in and you would see the same salesman. He would remember your name. He would chalk up the pants to the right size. They would be altered so they fit you perfectly. It was truly customized. And these are, of course, clothes for business, which have not changed a whole lot over the years. I was giving this talk at Laurel Gardens in Glastonbury, and before I arrived, a man came in with an entire suit from the 1950s. There's a kid that works for me who's 28. A big kid, plays hockey. I said, Kyle, you gotta try this on. He tried it on. It fits him like a glove. When we have special events at the Historical Society, Kyle is wearing a 1955 G-Fox suit. It looks fabulous on him. And for pleasure, of course, you had the golf clubs and the golf shoes. And I love this. This is the man at leisure. You don't put on a sweatshirt when you come home. Oh, no. You take off your jacket and you put on a leisure jacket. But you keep on your tie and you keep on your shirt. But this is dressing down in the 50s. This is the man at leisure. And of course, we girls always loved shoes. Who did not have one of those T-straps? And again, this is why people came from all over New England, because the buyers knew how to buy. So you have those beautiful night shoes that went with that, you'll see a dress in a second. You had the spectator shoes, you had the working girl shoes. The variety was like no place else. And now a noon meal was part of any trip to the luncheonette or the fancier Connecticut room. And those of you who remember the luncheonette, that's where my mom and I used to go. And the behavior there, I think about this now and think, talk about rude. Because what you would do is you would stand behind the other mothers and their daughters who were still eating. So remember that? You'd have those little stools, and you'd stand behind them, and you're looking at your watch, and you're tapping your foot, and they're still eating. They're finishing their tuna fish sandwich and their soda. But that's what you would do. And then you'd sit down, and another mother and daughter were behind you, and you're, come on, let's seat up. Now, the Connecticut room, where we never went, was far fancier. You had tablecloths, you had wait staff, you had models who walked around and gave you samples. Very, very, very different experience. And in the perimeter of the room, there were murals of the scenes from Connecticut in 1847. So it was, again, it was a store that really wanted to be the Connecticut store. So this is one of the models that you would have seen drifting through the room. This is the menu that repeated some of the mural themes. This was dinnerware that was served, I think, only in the Connecticut room. But I have met people who say they own some, and I'm wondering, I wonder how they got those. Maybe, I don't know. Can't say. And all of the food was fresh. Fresh because it came from the Our Farm in Bloomfield, and that the family owned. So you had fresh milk, fresh cheese, fresh butter, fresh chickens. Now, the one thing that I hear people talk about the most, and usually if I had more time, I would say, hey, what are the things you remember eating at the Connecticut room in the luncheonette? But I'm going to tell you what was one of the favorites, which was the date nut bread. Yeah. And I have for all of you here in the front the date nut bread recipe, giving you the opportunity to cook with Crisco. How long has it been since you've been able to do that? Could you hold this for a second? And no, that's the wrong one. No, it's right here. That was the wrong thing. Look, I have quite at least I hope I can. So we start here, pass it around. Okay, so moving along, it was always time then for a smoke on the 4th floor at the lounge, which we all remember. Remember that area in the middle where you could smoke and relax? Then on to the 5th floor. It was either called the Vogue store or in some places the specialty store. Again, this is why people came from all over. Look at the variety. You didn't just have the dress. You had the jacket. You had that unbelievably unattractive hat. But you had All of those elements. And when I listened to the interviews with the former employees, what they were told is you never say, may I help you? But you say, gee, I noticed that you were looking at that dress. There's a lovely hat that goes with it. And so there was always that feeling of, how can we upsell? How can we cross-sell? That's what they were trained to do. A beautiful Christian Dior silk suit, which we own in our collections, that was sold in G. Fox. This is the most beautiful dress. Can't you see Audrey Hepburn on it with her martini? And all of those flowers are applique. This is Talbot's catalog, 2010. Okay, let me go back. 1950, 2010. Get out your 1950s clothes, you're right in style. Here's a beautiful evening dress. Another evening dress in our collection sold at G. Fox. And of course, every well-dressed woman of the 50s, which we don't wear at all anymore, wear hats and gloves. So this is the millinery salon where you would sit there and the sales girl would come and give you a variety of hats to try on. And here are some. I was talking at an auxiliary in Glastonbury last spring. Every woman there came wearing a 1950s G. Fox hat. How they got them, I don't know, but it was absolutely adorable. They all looked like this, the floral spring ones. It was so cute. This is probably the end of the 50s, more of a Jetson kind of look. And this is, again, a 1950s hat. We all know, and we probably all owned, a G. Fox hat box. Now, the bridal salon was the first stop after receiving the diamond. And I have to stop here to tell you a quick story. I met a woman. I was giving this talk to a Daughters of the American Revolution group, and one of the women there afterwards came up. She had tears in her eyes, and it turns out she was married in 1955. And she said, oh, Elizabeth, I remember my wedding now like it was yesterday, and I hadn't thought about it in all these years. I felt so beautiful. My dress was gorgeous. It had a long train. I was married, and they treated me beautifully. They helped me with my invitations, the photogravure, the flowers. They did everything for me at G. Fox. And she said, may I share with you my picture? I said, I would love it. So what you're going to see is a little series of brides, actual brides from the 1950s, including her. So this was Dottie Conklin in her 1950s dress. Dorothy Balboni in her silk dress made and sold at G. Fox. Eleanor Tinto. Anne Marie O'Brien, and look at that. Her daughter was married in the same dress, 1985. Isn't that so cute? This is Lois Bingham. This is the woman I spoke with. Isn't that dress to die for? Look at that train. Look at the back. And she said when she went to Vermont and she unpacked what G. Fox had packed for her, there wasn't a wrinkle. It was gorgeous. Now the next picture was from a woman. She's in Seabury. I was giving this talk there, and she said, can I give you my picture? And she showed it to me, and I literally went like this. I went, oh, because she's so gorgeous, like Hollywood gorgeous. Look at this girl, Shirley George. Have you ever seen a more beautiful bride? Look at her. Her hair, her face, that dress, that figure. She married a guy who was like a sergeant in the army at the time, and as I say, he had to have gone AWOL when he saw that vision walking down the tunnel. Gorgeous. Soon afterwards, of course, because it was the 50s, there were just, no time to spare. You were on the 6th floor with the babies, infants wear. And I love this. I love the baby stove they're making out. Where's Child and Family Services when you need it? They're not there in the 50s. No railing, nothing. I mean, this is the way it was. Okay, I'm going to read this because it's too good to pass up. All right, look at this. Again, children in the 50s, it's amazing we all still have teeth. For a better start in life, start cola early. How soon is too soon? Not soon enough. Laboratory tests over the last few years have proven that babies who start drinking soda during that early formative period have a much higher chance of gaining acceptance and fitting in during those awkward preteen years. So do yourself a favor. Do your child a favor. Start them on a strict regimen of sodas and other sugary carbonated beverages right now for a lifetime of guaranteed happiness. Soda Pop Board of America. You know, isn't that unbelievable? Now, we all remember the saddle shoes. We all remember the little box where you measured it. My husband talks about every year going in and having his feet x-rayed. Yeah. You know, to see how you'd grown. And again, it's the same thing. It's amazing that we all still can walk and have teeth. I put this in because this was from a 1957 catalog. Every mother wanted their daughter to be dressed like Shirley Temple and have hair like Shirley Temple. And the 50s homemakers could buy all their housewares on 7. If you still have some of these, you never part with them. That egg beater, the egg beater, we have one. It still works better than anything you could possibly buy. Love this one, Christmas morning. She'll be happier with a Hoover. Yeah. Oh yeah. What would your wife want more than a vacuum cleaner?
I got a wheelbarrow, so it's okay. All right.
If you have this cookware, you still have it, you'll pass it on to your children and grandchildren because it's so fabulous. And these are, again, part of our collection, sold in G. Fox. You cannot make better toast than in that toaster. And the upper floors, remember the Connecticut house? That was actually my favorite part of going to G. Fox. It was a house on the floor with shingles, with everything, and you just would walk in and think, I am transported and I now live in this rich family's home. It was beautifully designed, beautifully decorated, and every few months they would update it. It was also on this floor that they sold lamps and this plate. And there's a lady over here who has the very plate that was sold there. She got it at a flea market, tag sale? Tag sale for how much? 75 cents. Well, we should auction it off here. What do you say? 75 going? But isn't this great? Isn't this fabulous? I mean, who wouldn't pick this up? This is just so iconic, Connecticut and Hartford. Thank you so much for bringing that in. That's lovely. And yes, they did sell that. That's not something that people would have lifted from the Connecticut room. And then women crowded on to the Sentinel Hill Hall. You remember that. There were fundraisers there. There were lectures there. Anybody who was anybody who came through Hartford in the 1950s spoke at Sentinel Hill Hall. It was Bob Hope. It was Gina Lola Brigida. It was Zsa Zsa Gabor. She came like Paris Hilton with a little dog. They all came to G. Fox because it was as much a cultural center as it was a place to shop. That was the big difference between department stores then and now. They wanted to be everything for you. Now, children were, of course, rewarded by Toyland on the 11th floor. Do any of you own this blue Tonka truck? If you do, it's worth $4,000. $4,000. And I've had guys come to this talk just to see if there was anybody they could buy it from, because it's so darn collectible. Then, of course, we all loved anything having to do with Mickey Mouse, Raggedy Ann and Andy, and there was no place like Fox's at Christmas. And I think you've seen a lot of PR about Fox's recently, because when anyone thinks of Christmas time, they think of G. Fox. You never felt like you could really celebrate the holidays until you got there. The marquee, as you see in this drawing, this was that period when they did the little colonial villages, and people would come from Litchfield County, and they would line up their cars on Church Street just to be able to see the marquee. This was later on. This was from a catalog, 1957, where you have packages and candles and things like that. And then these are the things that were sold to little girls like me in the 1950s. So this, you have the little Lulu doll, you've got the doll carriages, and then you have, this is what was sold to little boys. And I have to apologize to my husband for what I'm going to tell you, because he said, never, ever, ever tell this to anybody else. So, hey, this is only a group of close friends, right? So I was telling him that of everything in this presentation, what really, really resonates with me for some reason visually is this little boy in the cowboy outfit, because I must have seen a lot of little boys in the 50s who were wearing this. And he said, well, you know, I've been married to the man for over 30 years. And he said, you know, I had a cowboy outfit like that. And he said, I loved it. I wore it forever. And the one thing I wanted that matched it more than else was a Roy Rogers holster set. He said he asked for his parents for that for Christmas. Christmas morning came, he opened it up, and there was a holster set, and it was a Dale Evans one. Can you imagine doing that to your little boy? White with gold, the red. I laughed so hard when he told me that. He said, don't tell a soul. I said, I'm telling the whole world. And I said, but Terry, why did your parents do that? Why? Because the Dale Evans one was cheaper. Never, ever, ever do that to your kid. Never. Awful. Okay. Regardless of the time of year, this was the shopping bag you would see all over the state. And the delightful experience was due to one woman, our Beatrice Fox Auerbach. Here she is when she was managing the store, and the picture of her as a little girl. She was the granddaughter of the founder, Gerson Fox, who was a Bavarian Jew. He had a pushcart business on Front Street, and before he founded the store that I mentioned at the beginning in 1847. And he really started that whole concept of customer service. This was his son, Moses Fox, who really brought the store to where it was, and it was he and Beatrice who saw that store when it was burning, and he resolved to rebuild. Now, the story that I've heard about Moses Fox, and again, I hear, every time I go out, I hear something new and great. The Moses Fox story that I heard was that he was in New York on a buying spree. He was not dressed all that well, and he went to a hotel and to stay overnight, and the manager sort of thought, geez, I don't know, can this guy really afford to stay here overnight? So Moses Fox said to him, call my bank back in Hartford. Calls the bank back in Hartford. The bank says, yeah, let him stay overnight because he can buy your whole hotel. And I believe that I think we have plans for a house he was going to build in Hartford that looked like one of the Newport mansions, but he never did get around to doing that. So it was on a cruise like this that Beatrice met George Auerbach, who became her husband. They were very similar in backgrounds. He was Jewish, as was she. He had a family who had a store like G. Fox in Salt Lake City, and they had a true love affair. He adored her. We have their correspondence, and this was their picture when they were married in 1911. And we have, I'm just going to read you the first sentences of the kind of letters he would write to her. Now, he wrote to her about business decisions, but listen to this. He says, my own dearest, who do you love and say, dearest G, I've been thinking and thinking of you all day and say, I do love you, my own sweetheart. Isn't that just so 1911 and so not 2011 and 12? You know, who writes that way? And can you imagine getting that? It's just wonderful. I love that letter. So they came back to Hartford to help run the store after it burned down. And George was very, very instrumental. Beatrice became social, and she had a great life, and so did he. But very, very sadly, he died in 1927. Had he not died, her family and fellow employees said she probably would not have gone in and run that store. It was a big moment, and she wanted that store so much to survive that she then, at the age of 40, with 2 children, took over the company. And her goal was to make G. Fox a center for living in Connecticut. I love this picture. She's diminutive, much shorter than me. I remember my mother pointing her out to one time with awe. And there's a wonderful book. Can you show it? Is there, oh yeah, see the book right in the middle there? This is called A Woman in Business. We sell it at the Historical Society. I have order forms here if any of you are interested. To be honest with you, you can also get it on Amazon. But anyhow, it's a fabulous book, A Woman in Business by Virginia Hale. And I've read this a couple of times. It's big print. It tells you all about Hartford. It tells you all about her. But this is where I learned so much about how she ran that store. Because what she would do is in the morning, she had hair down to her waist. She would come in, she would go up in the elevator, she would have her hair done in an updo, and then she would manage her staff. Then in the afternoon, and you all know this story, she would walk from floor to floor. Woe be to God, the sales girl that had any dust on her counter, because she was wearing a white glove, and she would make sure it was crystal clear. She really wanted that store to be perfect. And if there was a sales girl there who had to get her bus at 6 o'clock, and there was still a customer there, she had to stay. The customer was very, very, very important. She set the standard with the delivery with 147 cars and trucks. And I met a woman who said she was typing her paper for high school, and she ran out of typing paper. She called G. Fox. A delivery truck came with a ream of paper in an hour. Imagine that kind of service? Yeah, not today. They also had a helicopter at times. I don't think they had the helicopter all the time. But the helicopter, there were two, and they went all over the state. And you know this story too. It's a famous story that they would deliver something as small as a spool of thread, and if you didn't like the color, they would pick it back up again. Talk about delivery. And it got to the point where in some families, they would just expect the G. Fox delivery man every Friday afternoon. He'd come in, he wouldn't even knock on the door anymore. He'd just come in, deliver what he had to, have a drink with the family. It became just, they just were so much part of this Connecticut state. 3,000 employees serves 21,000 customers on an average day. At Christmas time, there were 30,000 customers a day. Remember that? You couldn't even get up the escalator. You had to go 2 by 2 to get up in the escalator. It was so busy. And there were 63 full-time staff who worked in alterations because everything you bought from G. Fox should fit perfectly. I heard interviews with guys who worked in the furniture department, and if there was a scratch before it was sent out, it was repaired. If there was anything wrong, they would fix it. The standard was whatever you got was going to be great. Employees enjoyed sick pay, paid vacations, scholarships for their children, retirement plan, and interest-free loans. And she was beloved by her employees. I have to read you something that I was speaking in Rockville, and a woman gave me this. And I am going to take the time to read it because it's just so incredibly poignant. She said, she gave me this letter. We have the original now at the Historical Society, but it's from Mrs. Auerbach. And she says, "Dear Mrs. Eau Claire, because I have been away from the office," this is just before Beatrice died, "because I've been away from the office recuperating from a rather prolonged illness, your gracious letter has not been acknowledged. Although I am sure you did not intend for your letter to be answered, I cannot refrain from telling you what a pleasure it gave me to read the nice things you had to say about G. Fox. My hope is that we may continue to serve you so that there will never be a question of your changing your opinion of us. Many thanks for your taking the time to express your satisfaction, and with all good wishes for the brand new year, I am Beatrice Fox Auerbach." The woman who gave this to me found it in her parents' safe deposit box after they died with all their precious papers. So that relationship with Beatrice was so precious to them that it was one of their most treasured documents, and she gave it to us, which I think is quite lovely. But it really speaks to the relationship that people felt they had with her. They wanted to do right by her. They wanted her to be proud of them. Her standards were their standards. You all remember the elevators, and if I say close your eyes, can't you just hear the sound of that door closing, that metal door closing? And then the operators would have those round things, and you'd go up from floor to floor. They would announce what was in the floor, on the floors that opened up, and you would just be transported, like Disney World would open in front of you. And Beatrice Fox was really non-discriminatory. In a time when Catholics were discriminated against in Hartford, and certainly African Americans, she was the only employer who gave African Americans jobs of importance. And in fact, one of these gentlemen, she was the one who would bring her up every morning, and she said, "You are so great, I'm making you a sales manager," which she did. As a result of all that she did for African Americans, she was a lifetime member of the NAACP. She also did everything she could to support women. In an era, again, where, Harvard was $12.50 a year, she gave $6 million to a service organization for women, because, and that what they did is that would fund other organizations, because she thought it was so very important for women to advance. She also personally trained her sales staff because she wanted those products to be sold a certain way. And again, in our oral histories, one of the sales guys, one of her managers who met with her in the afternoon said to her, yeah, Mrs. Auerbach, I hate to tell you this, but a woman came in with some shoes she had worn for 2 years. They were all scuffed up, they were a mess, but because the policy is you return anytime, anywhere, even without a receipt, I gave it back to her, but he said, I didn't feel right about it. And she said to him, think of it this way, it's not your money, it's my money. I can do whatever I want to make the customer happy. You could return a vacuum after vacuum, and you would get a new one each time. The famous story that I heard in the oral histories was a woman who brought in a pot and said, oh, this has never been used. It was a wedding present. Guess what? There was still chicken in it, you know? you know, the service was unbelievable. They accepted back whatever you sold, and that's how she wanted it to be. Because if you had excellent service, you would come back each time. You would know that if you got a washer and it was broken, you'd have it fixed, and next time you would come back and buy again. It was a brilliant strategy. She also adapted this thing called family circles, and this meant that at lunchtime, you might be sitting there in a family circle with a telephone operator, with a store buyer, with an executive, so that you knew what was going on in the store. She really wanted everybody to be on board. They had 6 registered nurses that served employees and customers, and if you were sick, the nurse would call on you the next day to see how you were. Does that ever happen anymore? I don't think so. She rewarded loyalty in the Moses Fox Club, so if you were there for 25 years or more, you would be a member of that club. It was a wonderful, wonderful way to recognize loyalty. And what employees would get would be a pin with their initials on it, and then every subsequent year they would get some kind of fabulous gift. So this happens to be, I think, a Staffordshire picture. I've seen toll lamps, watches. Every year they would get something different. And she would have a gala. She would have a huge party with cakes like a wedding cake. Look at this one, isn't that so cute? She's like, don't put your finger on it. She's going to the chef. And this is the menu of what they would have, which included filet mignon, champagne, the Moses Fox cake. And then they'd all sing the Moses Fox Club song to the tune of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. That's how proud they were. She was very active in the city and the state. We all remember the dog show at the Armory. She was always cutting ribbons for something. We have many more thank you pins than we could ever imagine that were given to her. Right now, at the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, the largest donor-advised fund is the Beatrice Auerbach Fund. There's $75 million in that fund because she gave so much to the community. She did a lot of it anonymously. If there was an employee who could not afford to send their kid to college, she would often just pay for it. No questions asked, no recognition needed. She was instrumental in the University of Hartford when St. Joseph's Cathedral, she was a Jewish woman, when St. Joseph's Cathedral burned, it was Beatrice who gave a tremendous amount of money to rebuild that. She helped, obviously, St. Francis and the other hospitals. She was so proud and so philanthropic of that in that city, and it still shows today. Her philanthropy continues. This was her home on Prospect Avenue in Hartford, and I've actually been in to see the new residence. I'm meeting to the owners this next week with the owners, and I hope to do a fundraiser at her original house. So it'll be in the newspapers, but it'll be really fun because you actually get to see very much how she lived. This was her living room. This was her dining room. These are all from her Christmas cards. And where I'm standing were French doors that looked out over the city of Hartford. This was her library. And it was a gathering place for dignitaries like Eleanor Roosevelt. They were very, very close. They both believed in women's issues. They were widowed young. And this is correspondence that we have signed by Eleanor Roosevelt to Beatrice, where you can get a sense of their relationship. One letter says from Eleanor, "I must confess that I was naughty and did not wait to open your package as you admonished. This morning I unwrapped it and I was completely overjoyed with a beautiful robe from Beatrice." Or, "I've just returned to find your wonderful country eggs." So they had a really wonderful, wonderful friendship. And when Eleanor came to Hartford, she never stayed at the big house. She stayed at the Our Farm in Bloomfield because it was more private. It was away from the publicity. Now, at all times, Beatrice Auerbach was a woman with exquisite taste and style. We have her 14-karat gold signature pin. That's her 14-karat gold cigarette box. Her own cosmetic set. This is in our high security area. It was done for her by Van Cleef & Arpels in, is it Arpels or Arpel? Arpel. Van Cleef & Arpels in Paris, made for her. It's onyx with diamonds, and it is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. This is her own bracelet that she wore every day because it commemorated the anniversary of the store, and her own jewelry box. But more than anything else, she loved her grandchildren. And what you read in this book is how she passed on to them how important philanthropy was, how important it was to be a public figure. Every single Sunday, she invited those grandchildren over to her house. They would all dress for Sunday dinner. She would show them how to use utensils, how to make polite conversation. And then at the end, she would give them some money. And at the end of the year, they would all decide what philanthropy that money would go toward. In the final years, Mrs. Auerbach transferred ownership to the May department store for $30 million. In 1968, Beatrice Auerbach very sadly died. And in 1993 was when the downtown Hartford location closed and the branch stores became Filene's. So the legacy of G. Fox is summed up in these words. It is the selling of service rather than products that's important, the filling of needs rather than the selling of merchandise. And for more information, I love this picture. I was talking in Windsor, and this woman on my left, on my right here, is wearing a beautiful dress that she got from 1955, made in G. Fox, fit her like a glove. And she brought that attractive hat for me. It was sort of like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Everybody was wearing something they got from G. Fox. But this is where we are also in the West End of Hartford. Now, before I close, are there any memories that any of you would like to share? And you have to speak up. Yes, please.
I have this picture.
Come on, you gotta come up so everybody can hear. So those of you who don't like to public speak, here you go. What you got?
This is a picture of my mom and I. It was taken, I think, in 1950 for 50 cents in Foxes.
Isn't that great?
50
Lovely to
cents.
have. And aren't you thinking about your mother today?
Yes.
That's, I do this because it truly makes me think of my mother and how special she was. Yes. Can you speak up over there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't work there, but my sister did.
Yeah?
She had been going to hairdressing school across the street at the Institute for Hairdressing.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Auerbach used to come over occasionally and have her hair done there. And she got to know my sister Eileen. And when Eileen graduated, she offered her a job in her salon. And when she started working for her in her salon, Eileen was a nice looking girl, and she asked her if she would be a walking model.
Fabulous.
So Eileen
Yep.
modeled Fox's clothes and walked, like you said, through the store.
She must have been gorgeous. I've seen some of the models and they're still beautiful.
My daughter
Yeah.
was there, and when the Star Wars came out.
Oh, sure.
The big Star Wars thing.
Sure.
My daughter was Princess Leia. She also modeled in a bridal show there. She was the bride. And we have lots of wonderful,
So modeling was in the
wonderful,
family.
wonderful memories of Fox's.
And how about you next to her?
I
Yeah.
worked there. It's my very first job when I turned 16. It was just for 1 week during April when they used to have an anniversary sale. And I remember we had to get there early in the morning. I don't know what time. I'm assuming probably like 8 o'clock. The store opened at 10. And there was this huge rally on the first floor to really, psych up the
Yeah.
employees and get them really into the mood.
Yeah.
And my memory of seeing this petite
Yeah.
woman standing on the cosmetic
Yeah.
counters, or
Yeah.
men's counters,
Sure.
and she cheesy, just the
Yeah.
cheerleader, like, who's the important person? The customer. The customer is always, right.
All energy.
And I was 16, it was so impressionable, but I just never, ever forgot
No,
that.
no.
It was such an incredible experience to
Yeah.
see that and to work there that 1 week. And then later, about maybe 10 years, 15 years later, I ended up working there again in the executive office, which is
Huh.
quite an
Isn't that
experience as
something?
well. But that memory of her was just
Yeah.
always wonderful.
They only had 2 sales a year. One was the January white sale, and then the other one was in April. And in April, before the store would open, for those of you who are shoppers and didn't work there, what they would do is they would have, again, this rousing department against department, sort of who can make the best. There were costumes and everything else, and they had parades to get people all revved up about their sale. It was so great that way. I can't take them all, but just one more. Yes.
I have 2 watches, Elizabeth.
Really?
One, and they're both say G Fox, and one is engraved from my husband to me before we were.
Isn't that
And
wonderful?
one from me to him.
Oh, that's so lovely. And I have to say that this lady here went to a previous talk I did at Manchester Community College, where there were 325 people. She identified herself as my babysitter. Isn't that fabulous? And probably there's somebody here who went to high school with my brother, Virginia Zima, because, I know that some of you are parked in weird places and you're standing. So let me just show you one more picture, and then I will let you go. I will stay here if you have questions. The one last picture I want to show you is a Connecticut family dressed in their G Fox finest. This is my family. Okay. So you've got my brother Bobby, Weathersfield, 1955. You've got my brother Ronnie, who was 3 years younger than him. This is Easter, so there I am in my Easter bonnet. My dad, and wasn't my mother a knockout? She's wearing her G Fox outfit that is a beautiful suit, the lovely accessories, the hat and the purse, and that hideous mink head, mink tail that I would never be caught dead in, but she thought she looked like $1 million. So I do this talk so that I can think about my mom. I know that going home, you'll be thinking about your experience too. And thank you so, so much for having me. Thank you so much.
There, people couldn't get to it.